Hello everyone, Mr. Young here with another Grade 8 Blender tutorial video. I hope everyone's doing well and they're healthy and you're continuing to exercise, eat well, and do all those important things that make sure you stay healthy. Again, I realize this is tough, but we'll get through it and we'll be stronger for it. So keep up the good work and let's see what we can do. So we're going to make our own spinner today. And before I start, I realized that spinners were sort of a fad and maybe 3 years ago they were popular and no one really uses them anymore. But I'm going to change that. I'm bringing them back. I'm going to make them cool again, at least for this class. Anyway, so we're going to make our own spinner. And once again, these instructions are the same for both sections of the class. This is 8A, but 8B is exactly the same. It's the exact same assignment. And before I start too, you might have noticed that there is a new addition. I did add something to the 3D name assignment. I added the previous tutorial video. And I invite everyone to check that out. You don't have to watch it. If you finished it, you don't have to watch the whole thing, but there's a couple of tips in there that make things easier for you later on. So at least check it out. And I'll be doing the same with this one as well. I'll be posting it inside this assignment page. Obviously, I can't do it yet because I haven't recorded it yet. That's what I'm doing right now. But once I finish this recording, it'll go up at the top here. And I'll make any edits I need to make to reflect the new interface used by this the most recent version of Blender, which I think you're all using. And by the way, too, thanks for all those students who have already submitted the assignment. You did it without the extra instruction, so that was good that you took the initiative. I appreciate that. And the rest of you, hopefully we can get it done this weekend. Okay, so anyway, without further ado, I'm going to go through the instructions here. So it says, you can read this yourself, but basically it should look like this when it's finished. It should have the top now, rather than having the standard spinner where it has a central disc with 3 discs outside of it. This has 4. It's just a little bit easier to do this way. That's why I've decided to do it. And this is sort of different views from different angles. That's what it should look like. Note, though, that all of the spinners, or sorry, all of the cylinders, which is what these shapes are exactly along the same plane. And I'll show you how to do that. There's a way to do that. And if you learn it early and you practice it, it makes it a lot easier. The trick is not to use the mouse. Don't move it with the mouse. Use it with the keys that I explain in this video and the keys that I've actually explained already up here. You press the numbers and you get exact values rather than guessing with your mouse. But I'll explain that in a bit more detail as we come to that. So that's what it should look like when it's finished. First step is always to delete our default cube, and I have to load Blender up. And before we start, the splash screen will look a little bit different this time. You'll notice that it comes in and you've got these files here that weren't there before. These are the files you were working on last day. And it's actually kind of handy to do that. If you haven't finished a file, you can just click on that and it'll automatically open up the last file, or in this case, the last 3 files that you were working on. So it's kind of a useful function, but I don't need to do that because we're going to do something new today. So I'll click outside of the splash screen to get my 3D view window up. I'm going to delete the cube. Before I do, I'm going to put on my screencast keys. You don't have this function, but this allows me to show you what letters I'm pressing. So again, we press X to delete, and we say yes. So now our cube is gone to cube heaven. And remember, adding is Shift A to get to the add menu. And after we do that, we're going to select mesh and then cylinder, and it looks like this. So Shift A to add. And so the last time we added a text, this time we're adding a mesh. I should point out here too that we're not really going to be covering all these extra stuff here. You don't need to know that for now. The basic ones, text is probably the easiest. And almost all shapes are created using what are called meshes. And I may explain what those are a bit later, but basically they're a collection of vertices. If you're good in math, all shapes are really just a collection of edges, faces, and vertices, and those are the basic components that make up a mesh. So this is what we're going to be looking at. So we're going to make a cylinder. Now, I should point out too, we talked about extrusion in the last tutorial video, and really, maybe you can answer this question before I tell you how is a cylinder made? How is a cylinder extruded into existence? Well, the answer to that is it starts out its life as a circle, and a cylinder is really just a circle at the top that's been extruded down to the bottom, right? So it's a circle with depth along one of its dimensions. That's really what a cylinder is, and we're going to make use of that today to make a spinner. So here's our cylinder right in the middle, and what we're going to do now is we're going to do instruction 3, which is to change the view mode from perspective to orthogonal. So what does that mean? So basically you have to be in the first thing is you have to be in the 3D view window, and I'll show you exactly how that works. Now, if you have a laptop, you may have to do what I'm about to show you to do first. Because what we're going to be doing is pressing the numbers on the numpad key, the numbers pad key, which on most keyboards, on desktop computers, that's on the far right of the keyboard. There's a grid of numbers. It looks like a calculator input where all the numbers are arranged in a row, and they have the plus sign and the minus sign and the equal sign, all that stuff on the right hand side. That's the num pad, or the numbers pad. And if you have one, then use that, because that's what you're going to need to do for this next step. If you don't, and if you have a laptop like I do, what you'll have to do is you'll have to change the preferences, and I'll show you how to do that. You go to Edit on the top menu bar here, Edit, Preferences, and you're going to have to click on this little button down here, Input, okay? And you'll see underneath Keyboard, right at the top here, there's a little checkbox here that says Emulate Numpad. We're going to have to click that. And what that does is it basically lets the numbers on the top of your keyboard act as the numpad numbers. So it's a way of kind of cheating and letting your computer think that you have a numpad even if you don't. So if you click this and then click exit, it automatically saves. I think, yeah, it automatically saves the preferences, so you don't have to touch anything. Just close the window. Okay. Now if I press my numpad, if I press my number 5 on the top, it'll be as if I had a numpad and I was pressing 5. Now, if you make a mistake, if you forget to do this step and you press the top number 5 when in fact you do have a numpad, everything might disappear on your screen. Not everything, but all the objects. And all you've done is you've changed into a different layer number 5. The way to get that back is to press layer number 1, or you can press Control Z to undo. That's usually the best way to undo what you've done, and you'll get it back. So you haven't lost anything. But again, if you follow these steps, you shouldn't have any problems. So now that our numpad is emulated, I press 5 to get into this different view. Now what changed? Well, before, this used to look like it could exist in the real world. It looks like everything kind of recedes into the distance. That's called perspective mode, right? Because it looks like it has perspective. You can kind of see the horizon way in the distance, and everything fades into that. You can imagine that if we actually had grid lines painted on a perfectly flat floor, that's what it would look like. But this is a little bit difficult if you're making shapes, because sometimes it's hard to tell which lines are parallel, which lines are exactly going in the same directions, right? So when we're doing designing, and it's a lot easier to do it this way. When you're designing, you press 5 to get into orthographic mode, and now all of the lines that are supposed to be parallel stay parallel, and it's just a little bit easier. It looks a little strange at first, but you get used to it, and it does make it easier. You can always switch it back in the end if you want to see what it looks like in the end. But this is what we should do. So again, 5 on the numpad, or emulate your mouse, emulate the numpad and press 5 at the top if you don't have a numpad. Okay, so now we've done that, go back into our instructions, and it says we're going to shrink the cylinder along the up and down dimension. Now, for those that watched the last video, you'll remember that that's the Z axis, or Z if you live in the US, right? Up and down, it refers to the Z axis. And we're going to do something, we're going to scale our object, right? And the first letter of scale is an S. So the keyboard shortcut for scale is S. So we're going to go back to our screen, and we're going to make sure that the cylinder is selected. It's glowing yellow, so it's selected. And I press S for scale. Now you'll notice that if I just move my mouse, I can shrink it and grow it to whatever arbitrary size I want. But I don't want to do that, right? I just want it to shrink it and grow it along the top, the up-down direction, which is Z. So I press the letter Z. Okay, now I can see that I can only change the height of this cylinder. So by pressing Z, I constrict my scaling function just to this one direction. Okay, so that's the purpose of pressing Z after you press S. Okay, and I'm going to go a little bit further. I could kind of guess to see how far it should go, but I'm going to be more precise. I'm going to press 0.2, 0.2, and then hit enter. Okay, and I'll get a shape that looks like that. It looks like a hockey puck. If in Canada we play a lot of hockey, and that's what a hockey puck looks like. It's basically a cylinder that's been squashed, almost like somebody drove over a big cylinder with a truck and squashed it into a pancake kind of a cylinder. It's a lot flatter, a lot thinner than what it used to be. So again, I'm gonna just review what I did there. You press S for scale, right? You press Z for up and down, and you can see that here. Now it says along global Z, so I'm just doing it up and down. And if I type numbers, look on the top left here where it says scale. If I type 0.2, right, you can see what number you're pressing by looking at this this number here. And 0.2 is enough for a spinner. That's about right. Note if the number is greater than, if I just did 1, if I scaled it as 1, it would be the exact same size. And if I put 2, right, it'll be twice as big. Right? So this is kind of where math comes in. If you're multiplying, you're really multiplying the height by this number. So if I said 5, it would be 5 times as big. If I said 0.5, it would be half as big. I don't know if you guys remember fractions and decimals, if you've learnt that yet, or if that's review. But 0.5 is half, right? So half as big. But in our case, again, we're doing it 0.2 is enough. And we hit enter after we type 0.2, and that gives us our first cylinder. Okay. Now that we have one, we're going to make it easy on ourselves. We're just going to duplicate the first cylinder. So the word duplicate starts with a D. That's not a coincidence. This time we do have to press shift first, like add. So this, where scale is just without the shift, you just press S for scale. With add and with duplicate, you have to press the shift key first. So we're going to make sure that our object is selected, which it still is. Then we're going to press shift D for duplicate. Now it's really existing over top of the other one. If I move it, I'll see that it's really occupying the same space. But without actually moving it, right? It's going to be outlined in white. What we're going to do is we're going to move the new cylinder along the left-right direction, right, which happens to be the x-axis. So we're going to press X to, that doesn't delete it in this case. It's going to make sure that we move it only along the left-right direction, along the x-axis. Okay, and then we're going to type in the number of squares. I'll show you what that looks like. So we're going to go back to our Blender file. So we have we're pressing Shift D for duplicate. Okay, then we're gonna hit X, so that's only going this way. Now we're not gonna move it with our mouse to touch it. If we do that, it's gonna be a little bit tricky. We might not get it exact, right? So we're gonna move it a certain number of squares. Now Blender gives you these squares. It's a grid on the bottom. So how many squares do we have to move this in order to make it just touch the second one? Well, if we move it 1, it'll be here. If we move it 2, it'll be there, right? So we want to move it 2 squares. So we press 2, and it exactly moves it to where we want it to go. Then we press Enter. Okay, so if I look at that now, it's exactly touching. There's no space in between it. There's no overlap. It's exactly touching, and it's also on the same plane. It's exactly where it needs to be, right? If I tried to move it with my mouse, it probably would be a little bit higher, a little bit lower. It wouldn't be in the exact same plane. So we, again, moved it only along the x-axis, exactly 2 squares, and we have exactly what we need. Okay, so let's go back to this. So that was this cylinder. So we're going to do this again. We're going to create 3 more squashed cylinders. Okay, we have to duplicate them, and we have to move them using this pattern, according to this pattern. So there's going to be one that goes above the center one that goes below, which we've already done, one to the left, one to the right. And we're going to be using these axes to help us. Okay, so go back in. This is where it gets easier. Once you've done the first one, the rest is easier. So we can select the middle shape again. Okay, Shift D for duplicate. We're going to press X, and rather than bringing it down, we're going to bring it this way, right? Which is really left, I guess, or it's kind of upper left on your screen. But we're going to press. We want to go an exact number of squares, but instead of this is 2, right? You might remember from a number line that these are positive numbers, these are negative numbers. So instead of positive 2, instead of plus 2, it's actually going to be minus 2. Oops. Minus 2. Okay, so you can see here, that's minus 2m. So we have minus 2, and then we hit Enter. Now we have exactly 3 cylinders right lined up in a row the way we want. Okay, so we've done this part. So we select the middle one again, Shift D for duplicate. Okay, now this time we're going to constrain our motion to the Y direction rather than X. So we press Y on our keyboard. You'll notice it says Y here, right? So, and rather than moving it with the mouse, we're going to type in how many squares. Well, it's 1, 2 squares again. So we type in 2. Okay, hit Enter. Okay, so we've got our 4th cylinder made. Our 5th cylinder isn't going to be plus 2. It's going to be what? Minus 2. That's right. I'm sure I heard someone say that, even though you're behind your computers. So Shift D. We're going to move this along the Y direction again. So press Y. Minus 2. Right? And the minus, just in case people are not sure, the minus is usually on the top. Mine is on the top. Yours might not be. I'm not sure where. Yours might be on the bottom row near the bottom Shift key. That could be where your minus is. Or you can just use the one on the numpad. If you have a numpad, use that minus key. Then hit Enter. Okay. Return. So now we have 4 cylinders all lined up exactly just touching the center one. Right, and we have the pattern that I described, and they're all on the same plane. So if I spin it around like a spinner, right, it's actually going to work. Okay, so that's how we make our spinner. And again, remember to save it. Now you don't have to save it to the Z drive. I'll be editing this last line because you don't have a Z drive on your home computers. This is where you would save it to in the school if you're using the school's computers. But as long as you save it in a place where you remember where it is, it's not an issue. So save it to your computer, and then again you can upload it like many of you have just by pressing the submit button up here and uploading the file. Make sure you upload the correct file, not the file from the last assignment. So it's important to name it something. And again, just to review saving, so you go to File, Save As, right? In this case, we're going to call it, we're going to leave the .blend on it. We're just going to call it 3D Spinner. 3D Spinner. And I'm going to save it to my Downloads folder again because that's where I always save everything. Click Save As. Okay, so now it should be here, right there, under my Downloads folder. Okay, so that's all we need to do. If you have any questions, obviously you can get in touch with me. I think most of you know how to do that. It's just a matter of going to the top here, clicking on this icon, and you can click on somebody's name. Sorry, you click on type YOUNG for name, and my icon should appear. Just click that and send me a message, and everything. I'll hopefully get a chance to answer some of them. Obviously, I'm not sitting in front of my computer at 24 hours a day, but as soon as I do notice that you've sent me something, I will do my best to respond quickly. Okay, so I hope everyone stays healthy, be well, and we'll see everyone again soon. Until the next video, take care.